Hello, YouTubers. Thank you for joining me today. I'm at my next hotel. This one is the Wood Spring Suites in Indio. I'm moving from hotel to hotel in Coachella Valley based on the prices they're charging. This one is costing me about $2,027, $28 a month to stay here. You'll see the Fairfield Suites over there across the way, and I had to stay in there when this is my second long-term stay in this hotel. In California, you can only stay in a hotel for 28 days because they don't want you there long enough to accumulate any kind of squatter rights, I suppose. But it's probably just another way to torture people who have been driven into poverty in America. It's probably just another way to completely torture us. Anyway, this is the room here. You can see it's pretty big. It's got a nice full kitchen there with a microwave and some stove and a full refrigerator. The Motel 6 in Palm Springs, you have to pay extra for a refrigerator, but I'll be back there again next month. I already made my reservation. Now, why do I live in hotels? Well, I live in hotels because my credit score was over 700 when I moved to Phoenix. But after Patty Koch and the real estate industry in Arizona finished with me, and when my car was stolen in Arizona by Arrowhead Honda, and that theft was supported and protected by the thieves at Geico there. After all that, my credit score dropped. I went to Arizona with a score of 700, and I don't even know what it is, but I know it's not good enough to get an apartment. Plus, I got evicted in Arizona, and I got evicted because the property manager there, Patty Koch, decided that I called the police too much. I was being gang stalked there by some Europeans and Mexicans, and they would send their children out to mock me. They had my car towed from my assigned parking spot. Wow. And then the swap outs on my car. Like one day I would come out to my car and there would be a red anti-lock brake on the back wheel. And then I'd come back another day and there'd be a mark on the front wheel because the thieves at Arrowhead Honda were coming around and harvesting parts from my car. They would swap out my good tires for their bad tires. And there were neighbors there that could see all this happening, but it was their job to spy and look out. That was what they did. They were gang stalkers. I remember once a Mexican and a European drove me away from the pool. I was there at the pool with two little Black American children, and they said, "You can't be here," blah, 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 blah. I don't even know what all they said, but they started a big fight with me. And then there was the boy upstairs who used to come into my apartment. His father would come into my apartment too, and they would steal my things. And then there was the elderly Canadian man across the hall who actually stole my cell phone because he was going demented, and I tracked my cell phone to his car. And then he put it back in my apartment, but he stole things from me. They even stole a crystal that I owned, piece of crystal, and my selenite. They would just come in and rob. So I was calling the police pretty often. I mean, once a European set loose 2 dogs on me and my dog, and we're kind of running away from these dogs that he let loose. And when we come back around where he lives, he's laughing. So I call Patty Koch, and I'm on the phone with her, and I'm saying, this man let his dogs free on us, like in Alabama, that sheriff in Alabama that let his dogs off on some peaceful protesters protesting their right to eat in Walgreens or something, or Woolworth store. It was terrifying. It was terrifying living there. So I called the police every time something happened to me. I called the police to make a record. So Patty Koch, they raised my rent. They knew that I was on a fixed income because in order to get an apartment, you pretty much have to give your autobiography. Okay. They want to know all your personal financial business to rent a place. So they know that if you're an elderly person, if you're a retired person, if you're a person over 65, you're probably living on a fixed income. And they made sure to make the rent rise by over 10% each time I re-signed. And when they knew that I was getting in over my head, they decided to tell me that my lease would not be renewed. So I looked in Arizona, I looked in Nevada, I looked for another place to live, but I had so many rude rental agencies pretty much look at me and tell me, bye, you're not getting anything from us. We don't house Americans, only Europeans here. So it was very stressful for me, very painful for me. Wow, I remember one place in Las Vegas, they wouldn't even let me in the office to talk to them. They just took one look at me. And there was another American woman just before me that the Europeans drove away. Just before me, she's walking out. So finding another place to live was virtually impossible there in Arizona because of the segregation and the prejudice, because there's so many assets that the Europeans from all over the world are coming into Arizona to steal, especially the water. They were really into drawing that water from Lake Mead, drawing that water from the lakes on the Pima Reservation, drawing that water, and they were building concrete canals. And through the Indian communities, through the American Indian communities, that water was just rushing right on by. But the Europeans turned Mesa and Tempe, they gave them a river. It was nothing there, and all of a sudden they have a river. And then they had golf courses that would draw the water. So they had golf courses with landscaping and grass and guards. I remember I videotaped and published a time when I went to one of these housing developments with golf course and land and water features in the middle of the desert. And two Europeans with very bad teeth drove their golf cart almost right into me. And I caught it on video. Now, I caught a lot of the abuses from the Arizona Europeans on video. I caught them questioning why I was on a public street near where they lived. I photographed a lot of them and I published it. And because I did these documentaries on European economic sanctions on Americans in Arizona and sabotages like the destruction of my credit rating and the theft of my car and the failure of the Peoria police to make a report about my car, and the way Geico in Tucson and Phoenix refused to cover the losses, and sent me to get estimates on my car over and over and over again. But since they'd swapped out my 2020 Honda Accord Sport for a salvage vehicle with rust, and I even published that. So when they saw how much I was publishing, they actually had one of their politicians follow me into Scottsdale. Once Donald Trump sent all the illegal immigrants that were doing all the work in Arizona and all the landscaping in Arizona, once Donald Trump had them all sent away, you could drive into these neighborhoods that had once been protected. You could drive right in and see the things they didn't want you to see how the Europeans were living in comparison to the Americans. You could see it, and I was documenting it. And one day while I'm in some hills of Scottsdale, a European politician in a convertible with a cocktail in his hand is shadowing me. He's following me. So I pulled into the driveway of a house that was for sale, and he comes careening up the hill and he sees me, and he looks so embarrassed. He slowed down his car, and his cocktail that he's holding is slushing around. I'll know him when I see him. He was an elected politician in Arizona, and he's shadowing me and following me. And so he looks giddy, because he's so embarrassed. And then he continues on around, and I go back down the hill. So the surveillance on me was deep and heavy. And when I started filming them installing huge concrete and metal tubes under the earth in Scottsdale and taking over public storage centers, well, they started to get really aggressive with me. And that's when I was kidnapped by the Arizona State Police, committing no crime, filmed on Twitter just before. God bless me so much, because I was filming on Twitter to say, okay, this is how the road gangs work at this part where they're excavating ruins all around Arizona. They're excavating ruins all around Arizona, the Europeans are. And this is how they keep people distracted from seeing that wonderful ruin right over there that you can see through the dirt. They didn't totally cover it up with landfill. You could see it. And what they would do is they would have a series of trucks drive. And these trucks would get on the highway because they could change the entrances and exits to the highway. They could change a 2-lane highway into a 1-lane highway. So if you're coming from Las Vegas, okay, and a lot of seniors would go to Las Vegas, but they made the drive deliberately too dangerous by reducing the highway that goes from Phoenix through Wickenburg to Las Vegas. They would turn it into a 2-way street and then they'd run a certain traffic pattern through there. And I had already explained to my audience on Twitter what that traffic pattern was. You have to disable your sensitive content filter in order to find me in a search on Twitter. But unless Twitter's deleted my account and my information, you can go back and see all this. You can go back and see it. So what I had done was I had already described to my audience the traffic pattern. It was something like a regular car with regular headlights, and then set close to the shoulder where you can't see it, a car with brights. So that you're like driving along, you see the regular car, you're not worried, but then there's some brights in your eyes, right? Those offensive bright headlights that should be outlawed, that had been outlawed in the past, that hurt people's eyes at night, deliberate to keep you off the road, to keep you at home, so that you don't even try to go anywhere, because those assaulting headlights are going to hit you in the eye and hurt you. They even rip your contact lenses if you're wearing plastic contact lenses and cause you eye irritation. So they're highly weaponized. So I documented verbally by describing, then you have the car with the bright headlights. Then you have a big old truck. And behind the truck, tucked away, another brights. And there are about 7 cars in a row, and they run the same configuration every night when they know traffic is coming, right? Because they've got beacons there. And when I was in Scottsdale, I actually filmed them placing beacons in a public parking lot near the public storage facility, because they were installing deep underground caverns. They were installing big concrete covered pipes, tubes underground. And they had them stored on the ground, and I had filmed all of this and published it in social media. So I'm on the side of the road filming this pattern, telling my audience, see, this is the pattern in real life, because I had to pull over, because since I've been I'm 68 now, and since I've been like 60, I don't know, 2 or something like that, driving at night has been hard, especially at twilight. At night, I can handle it as long as it's a road that I kind of know. And I'm not blind or dangerous. I can see well enough. It's just I have to be on guard the whole time, okay? So I pulled over into a parking area that's unmarked, that's just dirt. You wouldn't know it was there if you didn't know the road. And I pulled over there and started filming on Twitter this sabotaging traffic pattern designed to make you stay home and not use that road, where you can see the way the Europeans from all over the world are mining and excavating ruins and stealing. Like Douglas Rogers, the chairman of anthropology at Yale University, actually made a field trip with other Yalees last March to that area, to an Indian reservation in California-Arizona border. So they're very much not too far from McLaughlin and Bullhead City, where my stepfather left me inheritances that I've never seen. But they know me when I go there. They're shadowing me. They're tracking me. They want to know what I'm doing there because they think I'm there to claim my property from the trust. And they want to steal it. Because my stepfather was a brain surgeon that created a spinal clinic right there in Bullhead City. And he was a Basotho Zulu South African that came to America in the 1960s, went to the Northern Illinois University, graduated from there, and then went to Howard Medical School. And when he graduated, they changed all the laws that immigrants weren't allowed to become interns or residents. So we all had to move to Canada because he was married to my mother by the time he graduated from medical school. So once I started really exposing the dynamics of the theft, you see, if it's under the ground, when you get there, you don't know. But if I'm there saying, well, here are the pipes and here's where they're going to put them, well, then you know where they are. And you say, well, what do they need pipes? What do they need 20-foot pipes under the ground for? What do they need that for? What are they going to put in there? Big enough for a vehicle to transport. But when you know about fiber optics and you know about telecommunications spying on the people, and you know about electromagnetic weapons, and you know about laser weapons and other kinds of weapons that they are creating to control people, then you know that when you see people sneaking around in public spaces to control them, you know something's wrong. So when they saw that I was continuing to document their behavior, that's when they sent their police after me to kidnap me, torture me, and put me in jail. 2 different jails. In fact, Officer Crawford was going to kill me. He was going to shoot me in the head. I saw it. I saw it as he was doing it when they called him back. They called him back because I had broadcasted on Twitter. I had broadcasted on Facebook. And do you want to know another way that God blessed me? I didn't usually carry 2 computers with me. I didn't usually carry 2 recording devices. I usually only had 1. But for some reason, on this house hunting trip to Las Vegas, apartment hunt in Las Vegas, I actually brought 2 devices, one of which they could not affect. Now, I had already learned from being in Phoenix, Arizona, and there were 2 Caribbean men in the park near where I was living, where Mexicans used to walk their horses until the Europeans decided that they were going to have drones. And they started having drones there at the same time that the Mexican family was exercising their horse in that park. So they eventually drove the Mexican man away. I'm sure they had other strategies going on for them to lose their house and their property. But when I was there, the Mexicans still owned that property and a beautiful horse. But the Europeans kept running drones at the same time. They had a drone club that dispersed after the horseman left. After the Mexican American horseman left, the Europeans stopped having their drone club there. So you tell me that's not direct sabotage of somebody's right to be happy and to use public property because they're not European, and the Europeans don't want anybody but Europeans to own and control American land. So I was legally parked, and it was documented on Twitter and Facebook when the police decided to kidnap me. They said, "Get out of the car." And I said, "Don't you want my ID?" "No." I said, "Officer, what have I done?" "Get out of the car." And it went on like that. It was a standoff there for a couple of hours until the mentally deranged looking policeman that had been menacing me from the back, he's sitting in the back, he's in the back near the passenger window in the back, and he's hitting his baton on his hand, and he looks mentally deranged. He looks, like he's a learning disabled, and he looks vicious and evil, and he's hitting his baton on his hand, menacing me the whole time. that Officer Crawford is outside my window saying, "Get out of the car, get out of the car." So I said, call the sergeant, because that worked for me in Massachusetts. When they pulled me over for not being European, for being a Black Indian in Massachusetts, and put race on the ticket and everything, I was able to defend myself by calling the sergeant, by calling 911. But when I called 911 this time, 911 was complicit with the attempt to kidnap me. Arizona Public Safety was complicit with the efforts to kidnap me, with the successful kidnap of me. And the sergeant that came out, he actually threatened me. He said, "We're not going to play around with you. Open the car and get out." Now, I had done nothing illegal at all, not a single thing. And when I said I'm not getting out, because I could tell they wanted to kill me, I refused to get out of the car. So Officer Demento used his baton and broke my back window. Bam! Broke my back window. So I had nothing, there was nothing I could do but submit to being captured at that point. There was nothing I could do but say, "Okay, you blew up my fort. You've captured me as a prisoner of war. I surrender." Well, they put handcuffs on me, very tight, very tight. And then they put me in the back of a trooper, an Arizona State Trooper car that was custom designed to be very short and to have seats that waffled like that, seats like a wave. And they found my dog. He was in the trunk of the car. He'd gone through we had those lay down seats, and I had to reach through the lay down seats to get my second recording device. And Foxy Einstein ran into the back of the car. So once they put me in the back of the police car, handcuffed uncomfortably with that plastic, I said, "Where's my service animal?" And they said, "You have an animal with you?" And they found him in the trunk, hiding in the trunk. Because by then he knew that when the police come, he's going to the shelter because they're gonna get me. He learned that in San Diego. They're gonna get mommy. They're gonna get Silver Rain. And when they get Silver Rain, I go to jail too. That's what Foxy knew from his past, from the trauma they put on my service animal, trying to stop me from providing proof of what the Europeans are up to in terms of depriving Americans of their property and their rights and their humanity, their human rights and human dignity. So I was parked in a legal parking space. It was documented. And I was lucky to have two devices because in this park where the Mexican worked out his horse, beautiful horse, beautiful horse, the Europeans call the police anytime somebody Black was there. Okay. And I know this, I'll tell you how I know this. So these two men, these two dark skinned men who might have been Caribbean, might have been American, might have been African, show up at the park. And so do the police. The police show up too. And I'm going to start filming it, right? Because I walk my dog around in the area. And every time I do, a man with a big dog comes out, and dogs from the houses abutting the park let their animals out to bark at me. And it's scary. It's scary. It reminds me of that Alabama news footage we saw of that European sheriff that put water hoses and dogs on all the American people that were protesting the European takeover of their land. Europeans there own 90% of the land now. They've stolen all the inheritances and terrorized all of the heirs and claimed ownership, done their paperwork with their title organizations, and done their fake paperwork to prove legally that they own the land. So I knew that they had the ability to block recording on my phone from when I tried to record the harassment of the two Black men in the public park that the Europeans controlled and owned and guarded and patrolled with their citizen patrol groups Lions Club, Rotary Club, Elks, Masons. And whatever racially organized secret societies that they operate in to share their information, to share their data. Because when I tried to turn on my phone, the record video option was gone. It was just gone from my phone. So I knew that law enforcement had the ability to hack into an iPhone and prevent a person, a man or a woman, prevent a man or a woman from recording them, breaking the law and abusing human rights. So one of my devices was not hooked up to anything but cellular. Okay, so it was hooked up to cellular, but you couldn't get in through the Wi-Fi or the Bluetooth or anything. So I'm switching out devices. They must have been able to infiltrate both devices because I had to keep switching out devices. Because with my iPhone, I would have to turn it off and reset it in order to use it again. So during this entire standoff where the Arizona State Troopers are trying to kidnap me and are illegally detaining me, I'm swapping out recording devices and recording it all live. You can still see it on Facebook if you look under Silver Rain Runningcloud. I've got more than one page out there because I don't have access to the page where I put the report about the police and all the other Arizona shenanigans. I don't have access to that anymore. I can't get access to that anymore. So it's frozen in time right there on February 5th, 2021, when I was kidnapped by the Arizona State Police. And they were going to kill me. Officer Crawford drove me through a very, very long mountain road that was serpentine. So I'm in the back seat and Foxy's getting thrown from one side to the other of this vehicle. And I can't stop it because I don't have any hands. So I'm trying to make a cushion with my body, right? But I'm sitting on a seat that will not hold my buttocks. And my butt's not very big. You know, I even get complaints about my flat ass. So it's not a big ass. It's a little ass, and it could not fit in these seats, relatively little, okay? I'm a reasonable sized person. So I'm being held and jiggled around and knocked around in this vehicle until it broke my back, And you can still see, I still limp when I walk, not always, but frequently I limp. And I wasn't like that before the Arizona State Troopers tortured me into being crippled. But he was going to kill me. And he drove me not to a jail. He was driving me to the African Safari. That's what it's called. And it's supposedly a tourist attraction, except there's nothing there. Okay? It's called the African Safari because that's where the Europeans go to murder the Black people. They go there to murder. It's one of those jokes, like in Woodbridge, Connecticut, there was a joke about where Blacks were drowned in a river, in a lake, and they called it something about Black people, and then they changed the name. But you know, Europeans have jokes like that, like making postcards of lynchings and turning lynchings into festival events. They did that too. So we don't understand the mentality or heart of people like that. We don't understand, but we observe and document it. So he was going to shoot me in the head. I saw it. I saw it as a premonition as we approach the spot where he's going to murder me. And he stops the vehicle and he takes that computer off the front of his vehicle and he goes to the headlights, because by now it's pretty dark. And he's looking to make sure he got the message right, because somebody sent him a message that said, "Do not murder her tonight," because she's on social media. She broadcasted the whole thing live. Anybody who looks at that will know you illegally detained her. So they decided to put me in jail on no charges. I had not broken the law. I had done nothing. But since they couldn't murder me without being detected, they decided to put me in jail. When they put me in jail, they put me in a separate jail from where the European drunk woman was put. They put me in a cell that was smaller than myself, with a concrete hole in the ground, only maybe 2.5, maybe 3 feet away from me, where I was to urinate or poop, whatever I had to do, or vomit. That was the hole. And it was obviously a hole. Okay. And that was where they put the American prisoners of war. Now, the Europeans, they had, chairs, they had a lot of space. They even had a closed bathroom area. Well, the guard there tried to take off my clothes. I'm handcuffed and I'm wearing a belt. And he says, hurry up, get into this. And he breaks my belt off my body. He breaks my belt off my body. Well, not too long, he doesn't go any further than that, because another man shows up. Another man who looks like a higher class European shows up. And they put him in the European cell. And I'm in the standing on the side where the guard is ripping my clothes off. And when this European comes in, about 6 or 7 European men who had been watching me on live video, they were going to watch me getting raped by this officer of the jail. They come running out of the back room, and they run right out of the place. Okay? So something happened when the classy European man showed up. Something happened that saved me again. Okay? I saved myself from being murdered at the African safari in Arizona. But I was saved from being raped at the jail by the classy European man. So they make me get into an orange prison outfit. And because the European man is there, I believe they put me in the European cell. They didn't use the hole in the ground with pee all around. They didn't put me in that cell with the concrete floor and the cage. They didn't put me in the cage, in the hole. They put me in the European cell with the chair. And shortly after that, a transport came to take me to a second jail, right? So I'm thinking, oh my God, they're going to kill me on the way to the second jail. That's what I'm thinking. I'm sort of saying my prayers, they're going to kill me on my way to the second jail, because they couldn't kill me on the way to the first jail. They couldn't kill me and had to put me in jail. And now they're improvising, right? But when I get into the police van, the classy European man is there. And there's a wall and a mesh between, I guess, the men and the women, or I don't know how. I guess because I was the woman, they had already transported the European woman by herself. They didn't transport me with the European woman. And that's why I said, oh, they're going to get me alone in the next transport vehicle, and they're going to murder me, give me a heart attack. But the classy European man was there. I'm sitting in the vehicle, and all of a sudden they let him in, and I turn and I look at him, and he shows absolutely no expression. And that's when I knew he was my friend. Absolutely no expression. But there he was, looking too good to be there. Any man that looked that prosperous and successful and classy wasn't being dragged around by those police. So they take me to the second jail, and I have to change my clothes again. And a woman who is a Jew, she looked very much like a Jew, and another woman, both of them lesbians, strip searched me. And after they strip searched me once, they said, do it again, because they wanted to look at my ass open at them and laugh. And they're chuckling, and and I shook my behind like, doesn't bother me, bitches. You ain't touching it. And they laughed and thought I was cool, okay? But she took my cash. I was traveling with a good deal of cash then, because I never knew when I was going to need cash, because I was being followed so much and pursued so much. And they were hacking into my bank account so much, and I had already been hacked. My bank account had already been hacked and robbed by Juan Luis Hernandez and his brother Diego Hernandez in New York. So I was vigilant. I said, I better have enough cash to check into a hotel if I need to. They took all my cash and they wouldn't give it back to me when they set me free the next day. And they gave me a debit card that was alphanumeric PIN. And you can't use an alphanumeric PIN on an ATM. So they took all my money from me and gave me a piece of plastic that was useless, that was charging me interest by the minute. I had to pay to get my money back. But I got it back within a day, but they still stole $2 from me. And young European men answer the phone when I say, hey, blah, blah, blah. But they'd also stolen my telephone and my other recording device. So they think I have no recording devices, no telephone, no money, no cash, and then they could pick me up for vagrancy, right? But I had resources. I had the ability to buy a phone, a new phone, the same day they let me out of jail. But when they took me to a jail. The second jail was very far away from Phoenix, very far away, and built into a mountain where there was probably mining. And I think it was near Baghdad, near a silver mine, but I don't really know where it was. And in that second jail, they had an arraignment for me with Catherine Kelly was the judge, and Thomas Kelly was the second judge, and Tina Ainley was the third judge. But this is when Catherine Kelly, with an EY, was arraigning me, and they would not let me speak, okay? And they did not put charges against me. I don't even understand what happened in the arraignment. I just know that I was brought into a telephonic arraignment because it was COVID, thank God. Otherwise, they would have, I don't know what they would have done otherwise, okay? But it was COVID, so it was a telephonic arraignment. And there were no charges. There were no legal charges. In fact, they mailed to me 3 different police reports of why they put me in jail and why I had to go through their courts. 3 different police reports. And the public defender refused to listen to my story. I emailed him a full account of my story. He pretended like he didn't read it. The judge, they wouldn't let me talk. They wouldn't let me say anything because I was so stupid. I thought, oh, good, when the judge finds out what they did to me, they're going to arrest those bad policemen, because that's how naive I was then. That's how much I believed in the justice behind the justice system. That's how much I believed in my rights as an American. That's how much I believed in the Europeans that were controlling everything. I said, oh, good, when they find out what Officer Crawford did to me, they're going to punish them. But that's not what happened. They arraigned me and I had to spend the night in that jail. And they brought me food and it looked vile. I mean, you had to go through effort to make food look that bad. You couldn't make it. I wasn't going to eat it. I had no appetite, believe me. But I wanted to see it so I could document and be a witness to what they were doing to American people. Now, they put me in one cell that was totally closed with no bars, a totally closed room with a lot of stainless steel and camera, an open toilet where they can watch me pee. But when I went for the arraignment, I saw that there were a number of women, so many that some of them were sleeping on the floor in another cell that had a regular jail cell on it. So they segregated me. They didn't want me telling my story to anybody. They segregated me and they held me in that jail all night long. The next day when they let me out of that jail, it's the same Jewish woman guard on duty, and she's still laughing. She still thinks what she's done to me is hilarious. And when she doesn't give me my money back and she gives me this fake card, she's even more amused. And her love of sadism was really flowing, just like Fran at the Mizell Center. She looked a lot like Fran at the Mizell Center, but just how Fran was sucking up my pain and drawing it out and twisting and putting salt in my wounds. That's what this particular woman, Jew woman did. Now, you can describe people as black, so you can describe people as Jew, and that's the way it is. I was a black Indian American, and she was a European Jew. And she was loving my pain, my prosecution. She knew I didn't belong there, but she was really getting a kick out of it. So when they say they're going to let me out, I say, well, how am I going to get back to Phoenix? The Arizona State Troopers confiscated my vehicle. And she said, I don't know. Well, imagine how terrifying that is. You couldn't walk, you couldn't hitchhike, you couldn't stay outside the prison. You had to get there. And she said, I said, well, what do most people do? She said, well, most people have family around here. Now, let me tell you, most people are named Alvarez, Perez, Izquierdo. Okay. Most of the people in that prison system were Mexican Americans, Indian Americans, brown Indian, prairie Indian Americans. I didn't see any Europeans. And when the Europeans got on the phone during the trials, they were career criminals, and the judges and the lawyers were cajoling and laughing with them. It was almost as if they enjoyed being in prison, enjoyed creating havoc in prison, and the whole system supported them. They were professional criminals. It was weird. It was weird. But I recorded a lot of those conversations too, and published some of them too, of what they were saying in the courts, because it was COVID. And they had Google Teams, and they didn't know that when they didn't do things right, the defendants could hear everything being said in the judge's chambers. They didn't know that. So I got to hear a prosecutor and a public defender say to let a 62-year-old woman with a Mexican American surname, South American surname, let her spend some time in jail since she's an alcoholic and she's been there before and she had children. And every time they punish you, you've got to pay. You've got to pay fines, you've got to pay court costs. So it's economically devastating as well. And they were deciding to put her in jail. But the career criminal European, well, he was treated like a local hero. And I documented, recorded, and published all that. So after Catherine Kelly arraigns me, and then they let me free the next day, I have to actually go through a lot of trouble to say, well, could you get a case worker to arrange my transportation? My vehicle has been towed. So they finally get that done, and they release me from the prison, the barren wilderness. And there's a European man with a beard who looks like a stereotype of a prospector, a stereotypical European gold prospector. I wondered if he had a mule and a pickaxe somewhere. But on the way, it's a very long drive. It's like an hour drive to Wickenburg that we're taking. And on the way, he says to me, well, if this is not the right address, I can't drive you anywhere else. And I thought, well, what a strange thing to say. Why would this be the wrong address? Is what I'm thinking, right? I'm thinking, the wrong address? Well, they got this address. Well, when we got to the tow place, there was nobody there. It was an empty room with a ladder and bucket and things like that stored there. And not too far away from that was a gas station. Now, I didn't have my phone yet because I hadn't gotten back to Phoenix to go to T-Mobile and get a new phone by then. I didn't have a new phone yet. So I'm kind of in a situation. So I go to the gas station next door, and guess who I see? I see a brown-skinned Arab. And I'm like, oh my God, right? He's not going to be able to help me. If he helps me, they're going to come around and kill him later. They're going to punish him, kill him, and drive him out. He can't be an ally, of the Americans. He'll be punished for that. So I don't press him to do much. I asked him to call the tow place, and I didn't press him to do much more than that. And he understood and I understood that we were in dangerous territory. The Europeans were in control and they wanted both of us dead, and gone. So I got back to my vehicle where the Demento, Officer Demento, had punched the window out. And my vehicle's there. No, this is what happened. They dropped me off at an abandoned site where there's no vehicle, no tow company, nothing. But that's the address of the tow company, right? So I know that if I go into the country western supply store that the Europeans own in the mall on the other side from the gas station, that they're going to call the police to harass me, to show up, to intimidate me, because that's how Europeans are in America. That's how they act when they're trying to harass and terrorize real Americans and Black Indians like me. So I go into there and they don't want me walking around. You know, they're watching me. And I say, listen, could you call the police for me? Because my car is supposed to be at that tow shop, but there's nobody there. Okay, now it's getting late in the evening now, right? And it's winter, it's February 6th. So it's going to be dark at 4 o'clock. So I'm kind of nervous. Well, they do call the police and the police show up and a really handsome, tall, you know, sturdily built German man shows up, the police officer. And he drives me to the tow station and he calls the tow guy. But when we get there, the tow company owner isn't there. Okay, he's not there. Now, mind you, I only have a credit card with no ability to access cash. And he wants $347. But I had a debit card. And they took the cash, but they didn't take my debit card. Or something like that. I had a credit card. So I was able to pay him the $347 that they extorted from me to get my vehicle. And I had some Gorilla Tape in my car. God looks out for me so good. Why did I have Gorilla Tape in my car? Why did I have Gorilla Tape? Why did I buy Gorilla Tape? But I'll tell you, if your window's broken, if the cops, if the crooked, corrupt, European nationalist, racist cops break a window out of your car like they did mine, you can go for a real long time if you put Gorilla Tape on that. I had to go a very long time with the Gorilla Tape because Geico refused to fix my vehicle. So I had to drive that vehicle like that for, I don't know. Time just sort of, when you're living from one trauma to the next, time is very hard to pin down, okay? Because it's just ongoing torture. So my car window, my back window is secured with the Gorilla Tape. So I am able to drive my vehicle back to Phoenix without wind blowing in, without that horrible distraction. It's silent, it's sealed. And I still have to go pick up my dog that has been put in a dog kennel in Prescott. Prescott Humane Society had my dog. And when the police had me in the vehicle all that time and in the standoff, I didn't get to go to the bathroom. So I couldn't hold my bladder when I was being tortured in the police car. And Foxy and I both got splashed with urine, okay, because I had to pee and it wasn't going to stop for cruelty. That pee was part of God's body made and it was going to come out. So when the Humane Society got Foxy, he had pee on him. And when they gave him back to me, he had fresh pee on him. Now, I called the Humane Society and I said, I'm not going to be able to get there because I still had to go back to Phoenix because I was exhausted and I was traumatized and I was afraid to be on the road. And I had to get a new cell phone. I had to do all kinds of things. So when I get back to my apartment, the electric company has put a shut off notice on my door. They're going to shut off my electricity. So I had to take care of that, right? How did they know? My rate had gone up. I was no longer being given the privileged rate for the electric, and I hardly ever used the electric because I couldn't afford the electric bill. But they had increased my rate, so I was getting charged more, and now they're threatening to turn it off. So now I'm knowing it's a conspiracy. Just like when I complained about Bank of America stealing my money, I got hauled into the dreamy draw justice court where they put a judgment even though I was paying the bill. So I knew, and don't forget when they pulled me over, when Diego Hernandez, a public defender in New York, had a detective threaten me, and then the police pulled me over because I had some marijuana in my car. Do you know how skinny that joint was? It was tiny because I was on my way to California to buy more from a man who was going to be my business partner when I was going to have my inheritance from the death of my mother. I was going to be business partners with him, or when my business took off, right? But with GoDaddy stealing from my website and sabotaging my website constantly, my business didn't take off. And the proceeds from my book, all that stolen through cybercrime. All stolen through cybercrime. And the company that provided my internet would not let me secure my network. They wouldn't let me have my password. They didn't even know what I was talking about when I asked for my password. And they had me in a small business contract where they were where I could not get out of the contract of paying $235 a month. This was Comcast, I think Comcast that did this. So they were coming at me every way possible. I was not able to start a small business because of online sabotage. I was not able to live comfortably where I was living because the rent was rapidly exceeding the amount that I could afford to pay. I couldn't get out of these contracts. I couldn't get into new contracts. It was really, truly horrible. And then the police pick me up and torture me until my back is broken and throw me in jail without cause, without charges. Well, do you want to know what we call that? We call that communism. Okay? Kafka, Kant, the trial, crime and punishment. This is how communism got started. By violating government and paramilitary police authority and using it on citizens in opposition to the takeover of the land and the property under a centralized communist system. So it's pretty scary, pretty scary, pretty scary. I hope I'm not going, over things in a really disorganized way, because if you're anything like me, most of the stuff I say is truly, truly shocking and sad and disappointing, if I do say so myself. I mean, that's how I feel about it. I had no idea that the Europeans in America had consolidated their power as enemies of American people so successfully. I did not know that at all. So it's been a big surprise to me, these things that I've experienced. So if you're finding yourself feeling, a little overwhelmed by my story, I get it. I totally, totally get it. Because it's an overwhelming story. Now, this hotel has some kind of sensors here that control the electricity. The lights will come on and off all by themselves. It's very weird. Motion detectors. I don't know, but it's spyware as far as I'm concerned. It's spyware. So I finally get out of the jail, and I get back to Arizona, and I have means to keep my electricity on. I have means to restore my telephone. I have means to buy gas and get back to Foxy. So I called the Prescott Animal Humane Society, and I talked to the woman, and she told me I was going to have to pay a boarding fee for my dog. And I said to her, listen, could you forfeit that because I was illegally detained? And she agreed to forfeit the fee that she would charge me. And I thought, wow, she's a decent European. Until I got there and saw they peed on my dog and took his sperm. He had been jerked off while he was there. There was the evidence. I'll save you the details. But there was the evidence that before I got there, they got some of his semen because he's a very expensive dog. And he's not neutered because he's too little to go under anesthesia. And every time I wanted to get him neutered, like I did my other dogs, God said, don't do that. Don't do that. So I guess there's a purpose in the future for Einstein's seed, my dog Einstein, for his seed, because every time I wanted to get him neutered, like I did my other dogs, it was clear to me that I couldn't. I would even cry. I would even start to get tears because he wasn't meant to be neutered, and they stole his semen. They traumatized him so much that when I got him back and I tried to walk him, he started running, just running down a driveway that led to an open field. He just started running away from me. He wanted to get out of here. Well, anyway, let me get myself organized by cutting off this story, coming to some point of closure. The next day, I told her I couldn't get out there the same day. It was too far away. So the next day, instead of taking the shortcut, I took the long way. And I don't know if it was that I didn't have my phone. Because I didn't have my phone yet. Okay? I didn't have my phone yet at this point. And I know this because of a couple of things. I know this because I drove the same road that I was tortured on. And that road goes on without a break or a place to stop for at least 20 miles, is my estimate. And it's serpentine. And other cars are coming at you that know the road, and they're going very fast. Something happened in my machine. And they're going very, very fast, okay? So it's terrorizing, even during the day, driving that car. Sorry, I have to fix my wig. Driving that highway is terrorizing. And I remember I'd taken that highway once before and always avoided it. I didn't even want to go to Page, Arizona. I didn't even want to go to Prescott because of that road. That road is terrifying. It's terrifying. So I'm driving this road that I'd been tortured on, and I almost broke down crying. But you can't stop. You gotta keep going till it's over. It's like being on a roller coaster or at the top of a Ferris wheel. It's just that terrorizing, being on the road like that. And that was where they broke my back, in the custom-made Arizona State Trooper vehicle with scalloped seats and a close scallop narrow back seat so that you're scrunched up like this and you're bouncing around like this on the back. And that's exactly where my back broke. So I'm trying to find where Foxy is. And maybe I didn't have my phone. I'm trying to find where Foxy is. And I don't even know the name of the place. I just know it's in Prescott. And I know that every time in the past that I had gone to Prescott, when I show up, cops show up and I'm under surveillance. So I decide to go right to City Hall. And I drive right to City Hall and I park right in front of the place where the cops usually are, and there are no cops around. And I'm parked half in the middle of the street, okay? And an African man walked by and looked at me. And I was like, an African in Prescott? My people. I'm protected here. I'm safe here. It's going to be all right because my people know what they're doing to me, and I'm going to be all right. He looked Yoruba, in fact. He reminded me of Frank Arasanian at Yale. He looked like a Yoruba man. Anyway, the police do not show up for the first time while I'm in Prescott. And there are hardly any people around. Most of the Europeans that stare at me and do surveillance and follow me, well, they're nowhere around either. And I need them. So I asked one of the Europeans walking by, I said, hey, listen, could you get the police out here? And he does. And 3-4 police cars show up and I say, yeah, you guys detained me yesterday and you took my dog. Well, I don't know how to get to the place where my dog is, so I need you to take me there. And they talked amongst themselves for a little while and they agreed that they would have one of the officers or two escort me to where my dog was. I followed them in my vehicle and they took me to where the dog was. And when we get there, the owner of the Prescott Animal Shelter says, well, we don't have that dog here. Because they wanted to steal him. They wanted to steal him. They wanted to steal my baby. He looks kind of wilted here. Because he's old and his little back is injured. I love him so much. I love him so much. I love you, Poofy. So with the police there, they were finally able to find my dog and give him back to me. They were finally able to look through their kennels and find my service animal and give him back to me covered in urine. Well, it's the desert. I had fresh water in my car. All I did was rinse him off and say, wow. And the guy who gave him to me, well, he looked wrecked. Okay, he looked like he was malnourished and grizzly, and I mean, he looked like a dirty MFB. Okay, he looked like an evil person. He looked unkept and unclean and mean, and he peed on my dog. Well, that day I called rescuing my service animal, and I actually have a picture that I made, a piece of art that I made with colored pencils, Crayola colored pencils on black paper about that event. That's very beautiful. I actually published those pictures on one of my YouTube channels, maybe Logicadol 4 or Logicadol that I have out here on YouTube. You know, it's hard for me to keep track of all of my social media contributions under different emails because my life is so chaotic that I can't keep track of my records. And when I went to Austin, Texas, after the ordeal in Arizona, a criminal actually stole my records from my car, stole my certified birth certificates, 3 copies, stole my social security card. They just steal from your car when you are homeless, when you're traveling and you obviously have no power, right? And they know that because the European Nationalist Network operates across the country. They share communication across the country. That's why I end up in Winter Spring, Colorado, and police come out of the dark at a place where people make a traffic problem. I mean, it's a place designed for people to make a traffic mistake that I made. And the next thing I know, a cop is coming out of the shadows, right? Because they follow me. They come out into the highway and follow me. Even here in Indio, California, and Palm Springs, California, the cops show up and let me see them. And the security guards show up and let me see them. Because the Europeans and the Mexicans working with them want to keep me in a constant state of fear. Okay? Constant state of fear. But it doesn't work because I'm God's. I love God. And I know I'm here to be a witness to all of these things. And I know that God has allowed me to go through all of these ordeals, not only because I'm strong, not only because I can tell you about it, but so I can be a witness. So I can be a witness to things I would have never believed possible by people that claim to be American like me, that are really Europeans, in a network, in a conspiracy to take over all our land and property, just like they do in Australia, just like they do in New Zealand, just like they do in Hawaii, just like the Europeans do everywhere they go. They kill the indigenous people and they take over the property, just like they're doing in Gaza, Afghanistan, Lebanon, Syria, because they want the Arab wealth. Well, I get my service dog back, I get back to my apartment, and I find out that I'm going to be prosecuted. Okay? They said, first they said that I refused to stop. No, that was the last. They said I refused to stop for the police. First they said I stopped my car in the middle of the road, but I had proof that I wasn't in the middle of the road. Plus, while I was in this enclave, 3 Mexicans who were my friends in cars, and I'm calling them my friends because they really helped me. They parked the same place I did, and they're knocking on my car saying, "Are you okay? Why are you parked here? Are you okay? Are you okay?" But when the police came to capture me, he didn't know which vehicle to look in. He had 3 choices of other cars to look in, and he looked in all of them because according to the police report, he made the mistake because I had this blonde wig on. And he thought I was a European from my complexion and the color of my hair. He didn't know. His assignment was to find a black woman, and I wasn't quite black enough. And I know this because on the first police report that they sent me, he actually said we were looking for a blonde. He was defending himself. Okay. Now, the second police report they sent me, they put 4 pieces of paper on the same sheet. So the words were too small to read. Okay. But they were fabricating crimes. I was on the phone with 911 the entire time the police were following me because it took them a few minutes to go through the other brown Americans at this rest stop to find out that I was the target, that they were trying to capture and murder. It was me. So when they come after me, I'm like, are they trying to get past me because they arrested somebody at that stop? I'm still not thinking, oh, these police have come out to capture me and murder me. I'm sort of aware that that could be possible from all the things that have happened by this time. But I have a reasonable doubt. So I called 911 and I said, yes, I'm on blah, blah highway headed towards Wickenburg. And the police have a siren behind me. Are they after me? And she said, we don't have any record of that. They had no record of it. She had to be contacted by the other conspirators from Arizona Public Safety, from Arizona State Troopers. She had to be communicated with to know what the conspiracy was. And ultimately, she said, you'll have to pull over. They want you to stop. And I said, I'm on a 2-lane highway with opposing traffic and no shoulder. And I am visually impaired. There's no place to stop. Okay? And so we're going back and forth with that. And she says, then just stop wherever you can. So I'm stopped and I'm still on the highway. Half of my car is on the tiny little skinny shoulder, and the rest of my vehicle is on the street. So the police get out, Officer Crawford and Officer Demento get out of the vehicle, and they're directing traffic around me in my car. And that's where the standoff was, where I said, do you want my ID? Do you want my driver's license and my registration? No. They didn't want that because there were no charges. They just wanted me out of the vehicle. And I didn't roll down the window either because I knew if I rolled down the window, I had not been smoking marijuana in the car. And I didn't have any marijuana in the car because you bet they would have busted me for that if they searched and found it. But I knew they could say she had liquor on her breath, which I didn't. I don't drink. I don't drink at all. Very rarely do I drink. But sometimes I wish, that I could be able to escape through a good, strong drink because this life is very hard. So then all that stuff happened where they kidnap me, they take me to jail, they take me to the other jail, they're going to shoot me in the head, but they can't because I've published all the evidence on social media. I go, I fix my car with Gorilla Tape. The tow guy shows up late. And after the policeman brings me to the tow station, which is abandoned, I can see one of the factories, processing factories, where the illegal alien slaves used to have to work. I can see it off in the middle of a canyon, off in the middle of a little valley from this stop. And there's lots of there's lots of big machinery around. And I think the airport is not too far from where I am. And I'm able to see this factory that's not working, because the factory stopped working when Donald Trump stopped the flow of illegal labor, where the Europeans were making slaves out of the Mexicans and the South Americans. And I could see it behind the tow shop. And it's starting to get dark, and it's going to get cold because it's February. So it's going to be a cold, dark night. And the German policeman from Wickenburg Police that escorted me to the tow stop is there. And he says, well, I'm going to leave you. The guy will show up. And I said, but what if he doesn't show up like he didn't show up at the last place? And he said, he's going to show up. And I said, please don't leave me here. I don't have water. It's going to be cold. Please don't leave me here. And he got very amused. I mean, he actually laughed. And I actually fell on my knees and said, please don't leave me here. But when I fell on my knees, my legs got totally cut by broken glass. All of the ground around that area was made of a black, broken glass, that if you were trying to escape from the factory on bare feet because you had no shoes, your feet would get cut to shreds. I mean, I published the pictures on social media of the cuts on my legs just from falling on my knees there to beg the officer, please don't leave me here, Officer Schneider, or whatever his German Nazi name was. And he just laughed and left anyway, right? I mean, I got off my knees before he left, but that's how reduced I was as a human being. I was reduced to the point where I said, if he's going to leave me alone in the desert at night, they're going to come murder me here tonight. And if they don't murder me, I'm going to freeze to death, and I can't get in my vehicle because I don't have legal possession of it. What am I going to do? And I fell on my knees and I begged him, don't leave me here. And he laughed. And he was very amused. And he swelled up with a sense of power, like a demon coming alive. And he left. He left me there. Well, it wasn't too long before the owner of the tow station came up, and he was a real nasty piece of work, like all the others. And I got my car. I paid him the blood money. I got my car. I patched it up. I drove away. I saved my dog along the treacherous road. I got the Prescott police to come and escort me to the place. They peed on my dog. I got my phone. I paid the electric bill. That was the end of that. And then they start the court proceedings against me. First, Thomas Kelly is the judge for the bogus case, but I guess he wanted to save his career and not be liable for prison. So he withdrew from the case. And the next thing I know, they escalate my case with the charges dropped to fleeing the police or something like that, or not stopping when the police commanded me to, which is all documented on 911, that as soon as 911 authorized and verified this police stop, because it could have just been rogue policemen in their free time that are going to murder me off the clock. And that's what it was, you see. But once it gets put on 911, so they have just this one charge. And they escalate my case from the Verde Valley, I think, Justice Court. And Justice Court people, they don't even have to go to college. They just have to be in the club. They don't have to be lawyers. They don't have to be anything, educated at all. They just have to be in the club of European nationalists that are taking over Arizona. That's all they have to be to qualify for the job. So they move it from that court to Arizona Superior Court with that fake little charge. And Tina Ainley from Vanderbilt University. Oh, Tara, Gone with the Wind. She's the justice of the Superior Court of Arizona on the case. And she will not listen to me. When I'm trying to tell her I was kidnapped, I did not break the law, it's proven, it's documented on social media, she cut me off. She silenced me on the telephone. She muted my call because now they're learning how to operate the phone after I started publishing their judges' chambers conversations filled with racism and hatred and injustices against the Americans with surnames like Alvarez and Rodriguez and Izquierda and other Mexican surnames. They learned how to use the Microsoft system, Microsoft Meet, Microsoft Teams system. And she would silence me so that even people in the court could not hear me say what happened to me. And they assigned me Andrew Fallick as my public defender. And I even went to his office. I even drove to his office, and he would not see me. He would not talk to me. He would not represent me at all. And they finally said, because of your outbursts, we think you're mentally ill, and we're going to put you under a Rule 11. Rule 11, okay? Now, when I had been arrested for possession of marijuana paraphernalia, because you can't be given a citation for possession of marijuana, just paraphernalia, okay? When I was arrested for that on my way to California, in a little town near California, after Diego Hernandez of Connecticut sent the police out on me, put me on the police watch list, I learned they assigned me a public defender there. The Higginbothams was their name. Penny and Bob Higginbotham. And we got on Skype and we talked. And during our Skype conversation, they were trying to come off like European liberals that were really working for all of the Mexican Americans and Spanish speaking Americans and Black Americans that were being unfairly, unjustly, and inhumanely prosecuted by the Europeans that control the judicial system in Arizona. And Penny actually admitted to me, well, Bob and I have been fighting, the Rule 11 for some time. It's an act of intimidation, to frighten people and to silence them and make them submit to the charges. And she and Bob told me on Skype, and, I believe that Skype conversation is recorded in the cloud, my cloud data. And she says to me all this. So I published this with what Tina Ainley is doing to me, that she's trying to use this contested Rule 11 that they use to intimidate people that they find threatening or people that resist submitting to the European injustice system. And they, okay. So Tina Ainley, court orders me to undergo a psychiatric evaluation with a social worker. And I have to go there because Andrew Fallick says if I don't go there, they can come and arrest me for contempt of court or something like that. So I go. And it's an abandoned building. It's short-term professional rentals. And when I get there, there's a young woman marching in the hall. So I know my team is there. I know I'm covered because I know that she must be one of my people because she's marching and she's in the hall of an abandoned building and she has no reason to be there. But she also comes in the office and she sits there. So when this clinical psychologist comes out, his eyes are red. He smells like dirty old sex. And he has me come into his office and I say, well, do you mind if I record this live? Because I do social media documentaries. And he said, no, you cannot film me. So I turned my machine off. I didn't film him surreptitiously or anything, right? I turned my cell phone off and I go into his office. And then he starts with the threats. He says, if you don't cooperate, I report that to the court and there'll be consequences. And he repeats that over and over again, where a person would say, well, what do I need to do to cooperate? Right? And he smells like dirty sex, and his office smells like dirty sex, right? So at some point, I don't know, I said, well, listen, I'm here, I'm cooperating, you know, what's next? And again, he issues the threat that if I don't cooperate, he's going to report that to the court and there will be consequences. So he continues to threaten me, right? In this abandoned office building, in this dirty little office that smells like sex. So at some point in this process, I don't know how I got out of it, but I ended up turning my cell phone on, okay? Because he had determined I wasn't cooperating for some reason. And I turned my cell phone on while he was out of the office. And when he saw my cell phone on, he ran. And this was before my phone totally booted up. So the only thing in my broadcast was the empty office and the empty hall, because this man ran away when he knew he was going to be videoed. After he says that I was, I wasn't cooperating or something. Now, the situation I was in, he could have called the psychiatric police just down the street to take me away. Okay, if I had overreacted, if he had raped me in that office and I became hysterical, he could have just said she's delusional, she's hysterical, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so it was a total setup. Well, shortly after that, my team let me know it is time to get out of Arizona. So I did. I drove to Austin, Texas, and that's where my car was robbed of my data. And then I drove to Brownsville. And then I heard from the court that I wasn't allowed to leave the state, but it was too late. I was already gone. Now, on my escape, there's several codes, that were given to me that let me know when we give you the signal, run, run, run. So when they gave me the signal, which was being evicted, the constable said, we will let you know when you're going to be evicted. And they gave me a half an hour to gather up my stuff because I had my car packed, but people were stealing from my car. So I brought a lot of my stuff back into the apartment. And they said, you can come get your stuff tomorrow. And that meant that they wanted to have me out in the open all night. So if I'm in my car because I can't afford a hotel, then they can pick me up for vagrancy. So when I got in my car as I was being evicted, I kept going all the way to Texas nonstop. On my way from Phoenix to Tucson, I was followed. And people in the vehicles ahead of me were throwing pebbles. They were projecting projectiles at my car to break the windshield, and they cracked it. But I had been there long enough to know that one of the ways that the windshield replacement companies stayed in business, and one of the ways that they stole the antenna and electronic circuitry from windshields, like the one on my 2015 cancer-causing Honda Civic Hybrid, the way they can steal those windshields is by pinging your car. So I knew about that, and I knew about defensive driving. So the people that were aiming projectiles at my windshield to break it, so I would have to stop and spend the night with an unprotected vehicle and all my stuff in it. I drove in near the shoulder where they couldn't get good aim at me, but they kept pinging my car until they cracked the windshield. They cracked the windshield of my car while I'm trying to escape. And they sent caravans of bright flashing lights right in my face. And I'd already reported on these weaponized headlights. So on the way from Phoenix to Tucson, I was completely under attack. But I made it. I made it out. And once I'm on the road to El Paso, they're not going to follow me that far. So I got to Austin, where I was robbed, where there was a stair that was wet, that was slippery. And when I went down that stairs, I almost fell, and there was a man in the shadows. Because when people fall there, they're going to crack their head, right? And once you fall and crack your head, They not only steal your ID and your documents from their car, they steal your entire ID, period. They have your phone, or maybe you have your bank accounts or your, investment accounts online or pension information. Once they steal your phone, they have access to imitate you, right? And they already knew then that my family, I was incognito to my family because I did not want my family prosecuted for helping me or being my friend. So I get to Brownsville, and now I'm trying to fix my windshield. And that's when I come right up against the fact that Geico is not going to fix my windshield. And I'm still trying to figure everything out, because while I knew that in September, I was kidnapped in February and I was evicted in October. And in September, I got an oil change because I knew I'd be leaving soon. And I was going to drive my car back to Connecticut, where the family home is, and try to figure things out from there. But the wheels on my car, the tires were worn. The battery died. And when I got and all this happened after I got the oil change. The day after I got the oil change, I had to call AAA and replace the battery because they swapped out my car, a crappy 2020. It was a crappy car. It wasn't a slick Honda like the other Hondas I had owned. It was really a handmade Honda, a generic Honda. But I had no choice because my 2015 Honda Civic had given me breast cancer within a year, within 6 months. And I put like 50,000 miles in the car in 6 months because I drove all around Arizona and Utah to places you can't usually access unless you're getting 50 miles to the gallon or traveling with gas. So I was able to access places that had never been accessed before by journalists, American journalists, exposing hidden European communities stealing from the Indian reservations. It was unprecedented, as Donald Trump used to say when he was alive. So anyway, I managed to survive. I managed to get out of Arizona. And Andrew Fallick informs me that crazy, sex-crazed, drug addict he wasn't a psychologist, social worker that did the Rule 11 examination had reported to the court that I am a schizophrenic. Well, within a day of me arriving in Brownsville, Texas, Tina Ainley Court contacted all of my relatives. I don't know how they find my relatives, but they called both my children and my ex-husband and said, if you help Silver Rain Runningcloud, you are helping a fugitive from justice, and you will be prosecuted. They called my family and told them that. So I've got my children calling me saying, Mom, go back to Arizona. Go back to Arizona. I said, children, if I go back to Arizona, they're going to lock me in a mental institute and murder me. And they said, but Mom, the courts called us and they said that you're a fugitive from justice. And I said, that's not true, children. They lied. They lied to you, children. But my children still believed in the system. Maybe they do now. They had not lived through what I lived through. And I believed in the system right up until the time when they violated my human rights and my legal rights and kidnapped me and tried to kill me and then try to lock me up in a mental institution. But you see, in San Diego in 2015, they locked me up in a mental institution because the man I was living with said he said, well, at least you're not a big black man, but you're going to be out of here within 2 years anyway. And I used to write editorials for the newspaper. I'm in with the cops. So the cops would come after he attacked me. He even put a bug in my room. And the cops would come and they took me away. And they broke an antique bracelet that my mother had gotten in Morocco or somewhere, and they stole it in the mental institution. So they put me in a mental institution in San Diego San Diego County Psychiatric Hospital. Okay. But then I was trying to get therapy because my mother died and I was going through it all alone. And they said, you keep coming back here, we're going to lock you in here. And they said, we're going to give you Haldol. Now, there was nothing wrong with me except I was coming saying, I want to talk about my mother's death. Could I get some therapy? Could I see a therapist? But I was on their list, right? So I said, are you going to put me in a 7-man hold? And I knew about all this because I was on the board of directors of the Connecticut Legal Rights Project with, I can't remember the name of the people right now because, I'm telling a different kind of story and I don't want to, go too off track. But I was on the board, and with Juan, I had been working as a mental health advocate, and I'd even won an award in 2012 for mental health advocacy volunteerism. So I knew the rules, I knew patient rights, I knew everything like that. So I'm going here to this mental hospital in San Diego, and I say, are you going to put me in a 7-man hold? And they said, yes, we have to. And I said, well, do you mind if I lay down so you don't have to drag me to the ground? And they said, no, you can lay down. So I laid on the ground. They put me in the 7-man hold. And I said, please do not inject me with Haldol. My entire family is allergic to Haldol. It will kill me. And the psychiatrist, his name, he was a Filipino, I think. And he looked stricken with trauma. He looked like he had seen and been through things that he didn't want to remember in any kind of way at all. He looked kind of like one eyebrow up, one eyebrow down. He looked like he was doing things he didn't even want to acknowledge himself. I'm trying to avoid being in this window. I'm trying to avoid being in this window because you see the headlights over there. I'm so afraid of everything. Oh, look, you can see the reflection of the room in the window instead of what's out there. Isn't that cool? Okay. It's probably more fun to look at than me. But let me pull this down and let me close this so that I don't have to worry about getting shot from the window by one of the enemies of America. So I get this shot. I get this shot of Haldol. And I did die. I mean, the next thing I knew, I was on the ceiling looking down at myself, laying on the bed with my little service animal beside me, and they were taking the service animal away. And in the corner of the room was a mantis, a black female mantis. And they had brought me in to be her meal because they were collecting homeless people and abandoned people and feeding them to the mantis. That was how they were cleaning up the homeless in San Diego. Now, I know that sounds like totally unreal and like, well, you deserve to be in a mental institution if that's what you think, if you think there was a mantis. But there was. And when the mantis being saw who I was, she recognized me. I don't know how or why. I don't know who I am to them. I just know that I have been protected by some team of somebodies. I like to think it's the goody teas that have been protecting me because I have a role in the future that's meaningful. That's what I believe. That's what I've been told. That's what I was told as a contactee in 2017 before all this started. And when I died in 2010, God promised me I would not have a stupid life and I would be able to fulfill my life mission. So whatever my life mission is, it's a part of the future. It's post-apocalypse. Okay? So there was a mantis being there, and when she saw who I was, she said, "You idiots. You can't kill her. Revive her." And they did. They gave me some kind of shot. I went back into my body, and I knew what death was like because I had died before. But this one was different. This one I'm floating up, instead of the way I died the first time I died. It was different. But that's another story. The point is when they gave me the Haldol that I said would kill me, they did kill me, indeed. And I was leaving my body when the being I was to be fed to said, "You can't kill her." And they brought me back. Well, while I'm there, it's hard for me to remember everything correctly. But during one of the times when they put me in their mental institution, when I was not crazy, once was when Roger, that European guy from Louisiana, who told me he'd get me out of there, he drugged my water. So I was kind of hallucinating. He put psychedelics in my water. So I was walking around for a few days hallucinating until I said, "You know what? I think I'm hallucinating." And I checked my water filter, and there were little beads, little clear beads had been put in there. And Roger had keys because the woman with Alzheimer's that he was a caretaker for, who he used to torture, who he tried to get me to join him in torturing her and punishing her. She used to be the property manager there at the Orchard Senior Citizen Housing in San Diego and Point Loma. She used to be the property manager, so he had all the keys to all the apartments. And one day I actually caught him sneaking upstairs with a plant that had a mic in it to put in my apartment. I actually saw him sneaking to put bugs in my room. He also made my ceiling wet when I went for my mother's for the reading of the will and last testament of my mother in January 2015. While I was gone, Roger entered my apartment, opened the back window to the sleeping part of the tiny little studio, and aimed a water hose that he had gotten a hold of right at my popcorn ceiling. Now, I saw him playing with that water hose many times. And after my end, so while I'm there in my apartment at 2 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden the ceiling falls in on top of the bed. But I didn't sleep on the bed. It was an air mattress, and I hate air mattresses so much that I was sleeping on the floor in the front room. But I just so happened to be talking to my brother Tony on the phone when my ceiling caved in because Roger had aimed water at my ceiling. So the apartment paid me damages, but I didn't pad the bill. And I didn't, I didn't pad the bill. I asked for what I thought I lost, and I should have padded the bill, but I didn't. I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. I didn't steal. I didn't try to get something that I wasn't entitled to. But they had to pay damages for that ceiling that fell in. And then Roger moved the hose. So he was trying to kill me or hurt me or torture me. And later on, he hit me in the head with his cane and gave me a concussion. I had to go to the hospital because he gave me a concussion. And it was after that that I moved. I said, he's going to torture me till he kills me, and the police are joining him in it and locking me up. I said, I've got to escape from here, which is exactly what Roger wanted. And I had to flee. I had to be homeless for 3 days while I waited to find a place to live in Phoenix. I had to be homeless until I figured it out. Now, I don't want to just go on too long, but all these things really happened to me. So while I was in the hospital, while they picked me up and put me in the mental institution, and I don't remember the particular details, but I do remember this. They drugged me, and I hallucinated, and I'd never hallucinated before I got drugged in the mental institution. And what else happened to me was that I saw a phone number on the wall for the patient advocate, and the ruler of this mental hospital was an Argentinian Jew. And all the other doctors were foreigners too, Israelis and other kinds of foreigners at the San Diego County Psychiatric Hospital. And one day the psychiatrist came out from the back and said, I just finished talking to your husband, your ex-husband. And I said, you violated the HIPAA rules? You violated HIPAA? Because he did not have my permission to talk to my ex-husband. And I felt my ex-husband had a lot to gain by having me locked up because I was a multi-million-dollar heir. And I had been in the mental health system in Connecticut for about a decade after the University of Massachusetts and Yale blacklisted me. And I went into a depression. And when you become depressed about something that's transient, the mental health system takes that opportunity to draw you all the way in and make you a patient. It's just like Tom Cruise, the famous actor, said about the corruption in the psychiatry industry and the collaboration with them and Big Pharma. And Prozac created a path for increasing drug use among people declared by the state to be mentally ill. So it was big business around recruiting people to play mental patients. But as my mother was dying and she was asking me to be the executor of her will and her estate, I said, Mom, I can't. They'll take advantage of me because of my mental illness, and I'll end up giving the money away because I don't value United. I don't value the money. I value the things, but I don't value the money. I won't be able to, it'll be too much. And any professionals I hire will know I have a history in mental health and they will take advantage of me. And my mother said, I think you've been misdiagnosed. Now, my mother is brilliant. She was married to a brain surgeon. He wasn't even going to be, Isaac Tipetti wasn't even going to be a brain surgeon. He was going to be an obstetrician before my mother and grandmother said, listen, if you're smart enough to come from South Africa and be a doctor, you're smart enough to be at the top. Aim higher. So there in Ontario, where we were living, he changed from an internship in obstetrician work, in gynecology, to neurosurgery. And we went to the University of Saskatchewan, where he became a neurosurgical resident. And it was his dream to live in Chicago. So when he finished medical school there, we all moved to Chicago. And he started his private practice. And he became a billionaire. And around in his 60s, he moved from Illinois, Flossmoor, Illinois, where he had clinics. And he built a clinic in Bullhead City, Arizona, and had home in Las Vegas, home in Bullhead City. I mean, and then he got Alzheimer's, supposedly, right? And he was treated there in McLaughlin at an Alzheimer care center. But by then he'd hooked up with a European woman got a hold of him. Like they always manage to find our men when they have money and recruit them. And because he was South African, he had the France Fanon complex where he wanted to dominate a European woman. And this is very important now, use her for social protection. You see, he might not have been able to buy that property, but if she goes and buys the property and he shows up after the deal is done, well, they're in. They get it. And a lot of American men have to use a European woman as their beard, because if you have an American wife, you'll both be discriminated against. But if you have a European wife and you're feeding your money into their system, they'll let you get away with that as long as you don't talk or associate with too many other of your kind. So my stepfather loved me very much. And he never disrespected me as a person or a woman. And he gave me great confidence in my mental ability. He would frequently tell me, second to your mother, you're one of the most intelligent women I've ever known. And he would tell me that. And he always asked about me. And when he was dying, he actually called me on the phone while I was in Phoenix. But his Europeans wouldn't let him call me back or answer the phone after that. They would not let him talk to me because they knew that he had created a trust for me, and they didn't want me to be able to know in detail or claim my inheritances from my stepfather, the billionaire, any more than I've been allowed to claim my inheritances from my mother, the multimillionaire, because Andre Martin Tapetti, the former Illinois representative, made sure that he stole and controlled all of the assets. He told me, "You're getting nothing." He has a lisp, so he said, "You're getting nothing. You're getting nothing." Because he always hated me, because my mother put my picture all around her house. She had a big poster of my daughter right outside of her bedroom. She had a photograph of me and no other child in her office, because I'm the only one who moved out of the house and made something of myself by myself. I'm the only one that made the best decisions. I married a man who could afford my children, who treated me very well, considering. I went to university. I put myself through. I never asked my mother for a penny. Well, I asked, but I didn't get anything. So after freshman year, I didn't even ask anymore. I just learned to manage my finances better so I could support myself. And I never leaned on her. I didn't get pregnant out of wedlock. I didn't run out of money. I was no trouble for my mother. And I even went to Yale. You know what bragging rights that gave my mother? The judge, the circuit court judge, to say my daughter, Silver Rain Runningcloud, is at Yale. I gave my mother nothing but bragging rights. You know, my daughter, Silver Rain Runningcloud, well, she's married to a medical student. My mother had a party for my husband when he graduated from medical school and invited all her lawyer friends. That's how proud of me she was, of me and my family and my decisions. And my brother, Andre, who took 5 years to get through Morehouse College, who was an alcoholic and questionable sexuality. Questionable sexuality. He brought her nothing but grief and shame. But he was the boy, so she tried to support him. Do you know that he even lost a case against the city when he was supposed to carry that case through, but he didn't? And my mother had to do all the work for that case in addition to the other work she had to do, because Andre did nothing. He was a really, and they hated me for the way my mother loved me, for not being a burden and being a source of pride for her. All three of my siblings hated me for being a success. I'm sure you know what that's like if you were the high achiever in your family and the others were just a pain in the neck for your parents. Anyway, Andre robbed me. The Europeans around Isaac Martin Tapetti robbed me. And I was left in poverty. And that brings me to where I really want to be in this topic. I see I'm at an hour and 48 minutes now. So my topic is the creation of poverty in America and Social Security. I recently applied for Social Security and I was granted $1,188 a month. I talked to someone else I went to college with who gets maybe $1,000 more, or less than $1,000 more than that, maybe $1,000 more than that. Now, the average rent in America is higher than that. The cost of living during the years we were working kept us up to our necks in debt. They created and deployed credit cards in the early 1980s when my generation started to enter the workforce through affirmative action, right? We no longer had to be doctors or lawyers or teachers in our own community to have economic success. In fact, they used desegregation as their fight to make us a part of them so they could suck all the economic power out of our communities. Desegregation had nothing to do with us. We didn't want to be with them. That's the fact of it. We used to call it white people's mess. We didn't want to be in white people's mess. And that was our community dialogue. We didn't want to be with them because we saw them. We knew them. We didn't like what we saw. That's why the stereotypical Black Indian American woman in Gone with the Wind was Hattie McDonald. Or is her name Hattie McDavid? Hattie McDonald? You see, I don't even know, and I should know her name as much as I know Clark Gable. But to my credit, I don't know the other woman who was the star. I don't know her real name either. Okay? So Hattie, she was the moral center, right? Tara, the Gone with the Wind woman, whatever her name was, she was flaky. She was a user. She didn't even take care of her own child and it died. And if you saw other movies with Black housekeepers, Black babysitters, Black mammies, they were always telling the Europeans how to act and how to behave. And that's why Hazel Carby taught us at Yale that Black women were stereotypically known as the righteous conscience of America. The righteous conscience of America. And you can learn more about that from Paula Giddings in her first book. She wasn't a scholar, but she published the book that Hazel Carby used to build her career on. So the role of Black women, the role of Black men, it was cabin in the sky. Jesus, God, morality. Our girls didn't have sex out of wedlock. Our girls were in church on Sunday, so they weren't hanging out on Saturday night. One of the papers I wrote that Hazel Carby stole and gave to Valerie Smith of Swarthmore was a set of interviews. I interviewed 8 senior citizens from 102 years old to 79 years old about the value of the blues in the 30s and the 40s. Was the blues respected music like Hazel Carby was teaching at Yale? And the answer was no, and I knew that from my own upbringing. That we thought that the blues was for people in the juke joint, you know, for women who drank and did the coochie dance. It was for prostitutes and drug addicts and orphans, because all the good girls were going to church. I mean, my Black Indian grandparents in Oklahoma were the founders of the church. The Mount Scipio Baptist Church was co-founded by my ancestors. My grandma Louise was a deaconess and then the mother of the church. So we were not like that, and we knew we were not like that. Just like you'll have Europeans that they call trash and Europeans that they call high class or royals. We had different morals in the people too. Most Black Indian Americans believed in morality, and they expressed it through a belief in Jesus and Christianity. And we were known for high moral values. That's why you'll see Black Americans judging criminals in their community, but you won't see the people in Jeffrey Epstein's social class judging Jeffrey Epstein. They'll let Jeffrey Epstein slide, but if Jeffrey Epstein were Black, we would be all over him like we are Puffy, Puff Daddy, Sean Combs. We're all over him because they know that if our people do wrong, we're not going to give them a pass. We're going to say that person did wrong. So what they do is they constantly harvest the people that do wrong, so that we are constantly having to criticize ourselves. And the people that do right, like me, the people that are not a burden to their family, the people that go to Yale and study Black American culture and go to the University of Massachusetts and study non-European literature and teach it, the people like me, the Girl Scout leaders like me, the ballet school and ballet company volunteers like me, and marketing directors like me, the mental health volunteers like me, the Boy Scout mother like me, volunteer and mother like me, the room parent like me, the social media documentary specialist like me. We don't get any attention. We get ignored. But let the criminals come out, and the Europeans, the fake news, they want to promote that. And we are not going to say, well, that's all right with us. We're going to say, yeah, you're right. That guy did wrong. That guy committed sins, and we don't give him a pass. But the Europeans, they give each other passes all the time, and they promote their phonies, like Elon Musk. Nobody can do as many things as Elon Musk does in a day and have the time to knock up so many women and have so many bastard children. I mean, all the Europeans that admire him say, where does he get the time? Well, he gets the time because he's so much better than us. But no, he's a shell. He's an icon. He's the thing that they work under, while all of them profit and steal the assets from people like me. Steal the title to my land, my oil and gas rich lands, my inherited lands in Oklahoma and North and South Carolina. They steal all that from me and put me on the line where I am subjected to the kind of life that I've been living. So I'm looking at the people that followed the plan, and their reward is Social Security. Now, every single paycheck, they paid Social Security. And the public discourse was, when you get old, public Social Security will take care of you. Now, let me tell you, we probably expect you to have your own house, so you won't need much money, right? But then what did the real estate associations do? Price fixing, didn't they? Didn't they do price fixing? And then they come up with this idea, we're going to do low-income housing, and we're going to take over a lot of personally owned land and convert it into public land for public housing. And we're going to put people in little boxes, and we're going to charge them a fortune. And we're going to make sure that everybody retires with no savings, because we're going to take everything they earn to keep them alive and milk them while they're young. And when they're old and sick and have gone through unnecessary medical procedures that compromise their mobility and their health, then we're going to give them a couple of $1,000s. And we're going to make the rent a couple of $1,000 plus $5. Because we're going to make sure that the old people do not get to live in comfort, do not get to spread their wisdom, do not get to warn the others. We're going to make sure that the old people can hardly stay alive. And they will beg us for death, because they will not have any quality of life. And that's where I am, okay? Today, I have a tooth falling out, and I have a lump in my other breast. So I have breast cancer and teeth rotting right out of my head. I have a tooth so loose in my head I can hardly eat. And I went to the dentist, and I applied for Medi-Cal, which is no deductible on Medicare, on your Medicare, right? And they tell me I'll probably have to pay a deductible for my Medicare out of my $1,100. You see? And then they tell me that the money my ex-husband has been spending to keep me alive when I was denied disability or any other public help, and I was told by the state of Illinois that I was unemployable. And by the time I left graduate school, without any of the professors reading my work or giving me the credentials I needed to continue in a career, by the time that's over, I'm 50. I'm 48 years old. And I'm in Connecticut. So I can't even go back to computer programming. But I try to start my own business, right? And I keep trying to start my own business. But they set up small businesses for sabotage. I even go in for a loan at Bank of America, where I've been banking since the dawn of time, since they began. And they say, well, we won't even talk to you. Edwin Loema tells me, we won't even talk to you unless you have $1 million. We won't even talk to you about a small business loan. Where am I going to get $1 million from? Well, from my inheritance. Ah, but your brother stole your inheritance. And I let the entire cabinet of government in Illinois know that my brother was robbing me and violating my trust. I called every probate lawyer in Illinois, Cook County, because you have to stay in the county, and not one of them would represent me. Not one. Finally, one said he'd take the case, but I think he needed a short-term loan because I sent him the $2,500. And within a certain amount of time, a couple of months, he sent it back and said, I'm sorry, I can't help you. So nobody in the judicial system, nobody in the government was willing to fight for my inheritance, even though a trust fund is supposed to be protected. My mother left me an equal heir with my other siblings in the Latimer LGT Trust that she executed in June of 2014 before she died. Now, my uncle Warren G told me that Andre was going to steal the inheritance because Andre wanted to be a senator of the United States of America. Okay? Now, I believe that's true because that same year, Andre Martin Tapetti made the news for wanting to pass a proposal through the Illinois House to make Hussein Obama's birthday a national holiday like Martin Luther King's. Martin Luther King, you know, the failure that got us to this spot of powerlessness. We're supposed to emulate him with his nonviolence. I'm not saying nonviolence is wrong. I'm just saying that to have a holiday celebrating a man who was killed and a movement that died with him and a justice system that became totally inverted and perverted after that doesn't make any sense. But Andre wants to suck up to Obama and make his bid for the public spotlight because he's going to use my inheritance and my 1/4 share of a multi-million-dollar trust to fund his career as a United States pedophile senator. Well, I blew that up in his face with social media. I published on Facebook, My Brother Andre, a series that talked about Andre's upbringing, his childhood, my childhood memories, and it got stolen from Facebook. It got stolen from Facebook. One day it just disappeared from Facebook entirely. So I started another one, My Brother Andre, and it's probably gone too, probably stolen too. But it was seen by enough people to let Andre know he didn't have a career. So I ruined his opportunity to use stolen money to become a senator, but I didn't get my inheritance. In fact, he was heard saying that I will never see a cent because I destroyed his future. He ended up ultimately resigning from the Illinois legislation. But that was after he actually passed a few good bills because I looked at his record. And I told his constituents that 1 year, 25% of the men in a certain age group of 18 to 21 ended up in the private prison system, almost like a harvest. Andre was harvesting the young men and creating legislation to protect payday loans so that people would get in insufferable debt and lose their homes because of that easy money that they haven't earned yet coming through, right? But he cleaned up his act when I put a lot of attention on him. But I still didn't get my inheritance. You know, none of my siblings stood with me. None of my family stood with me because they knew that if they stood with me against Andre, who could actually have the toll authority send you a bill for a toll you didn't even go through at the toll booth, and he could have the toll authority extort money from you because that's how much power he had. He let me know that if I ever come to Illinois, he's going to sick the toll authority on me because that's what he did the last time I went there. I ended up with a bill from the toll authority, and I said, but I wasn't even at that, and I've got an easy pass. They said, we don't know anything about that. Colluding, right? And that's what the other lawyers were afraid of. They knew the secret power that the government and police will use to persecute people and deprive them of their right, deprive them of their assets, deprive them of their inheritances, and they knew that. So they weren't going to risk their lives and their family and their economics by defending me and winning my inheritance back any more than Judge Butner in Oklahoma, who refuses to change the title on my freedmen lands and my lands from the Carl M. Deck Trust. They won't even see it. And when I went there and made copies of all the papers, the European at the title office, in the county office, I asked her to make copies. She gave me blanks back. With, you know how you put a real dollar on top and then blanks inside? That's how she gave me back the copies of all the documents that I had copied during my hours in the Wewoka County title office. So it's a conspiracy. The land managers of Oklahoma are all Europeans, and they're all working together to steal the land from the Indians that own it. And I've documented that. And Judge Butner ended up trying to ambush me so he could have his cops do what the Arizona State Troopers did. But God loves me, and I didn't go that day. I didn't go that day. And then because I found out it was a trap. They were trying to get me on the road for a court date that was not on the calendar. I went to look on the calendar for the court date that they told me about, and I couldn't find it. So I called the office. I say, yes, am I expected in court on such and such a day? And the clerk says, yes. And I said, well, I don't see it on the calendar. And you know what the bitch did? She hung up. She hung up. The European hung up. The European clerk of court for Judge Butner hung up the phone when I said, oh, ambush, trying to get me in a trap because I'm not on the calendar, which means that I don't really have a case being heard today. Because I was trying to protect my land from the second double dipping, from them double dipping with the Department of Transportation to cut a slice through the center of my land so I can't develop big projects there. I wanted to develop projects on my land, but they have the Department of Transportation doing manifest destiny or something to consume my land and turn it into highways. There's a highway running through two sides of my land, leaving me with just fractions. But it doesn't leave me with anything because they will not update the title. They still have the title in dead people's names. But worse than that, they had Nichols Oil do a oral history of my family to determine the heirs. And they inserted a woman from New York going by the name of Joanne Deck, who isn't in my family. And the last time I went to the county to look at the records, there was an official document in Joanne Deck's name that gave her title to our family land. And some of the documents that I had photographed before were not there anymore. They had been stolen, they had been forged. So they're forging the handwritten records. I mean, stealing the wealth of heirs is big business. And Elon Musk can't buy huge mega factories if he's not stealing land from me. Okay? But they expect us to live on Social Security without controlling the cost of living so that people on Social Security can live. And they used up all of our youth. They made the prices so high with ever rising inflation that my people could hardly afford to take vacations. Okay? And the property we were allowed to buy was usually run down and in need of repairs. We didn't get the new homes. We got the homes that Europeans had already lived in with all their dander and dust. And we could spend our money to fix it up when it should be torn down. Meanwhile, the real estate goes up and up and up, and you're borrowing from the bank on the equity just to try to make ends meet, just to try to get any joy out of life. But what really kills me is Social Security. My great-grandfather that acquired that land in Oklahoma, Bose Deck, B.H. Deck, a co-founder of this town of Lima, Oklahoma, that the Europeans are turning into dust, with the Rosenwald School that is turning into dust. They won't let us turn it into a landmark. They won't even let me in there with my skills to develop and historicize my land. They're going to make it seem like my people, the Black Indians, never did anything to develop the land. And thank God the Europeans came along and did it because we were letting it go to waste. Not true. We were living through the Red Summer of 1919. We were living through the Osage flower slaughter. We were living through the Tulsa riots. We were living through Rosewood. We were trying to survive the European conspiracies to destroy our towns, our settlements, and our communities. And once they did desegregation and had us spread all out. Well, then you got whole big gangs of Europeans picking on you, right? You got people like me who might have made a good career in a Black community as a professor in a Black university not controlled by Harlem Renaissance Europeans. But instead, I end up working for Sheldon Epstein, who steals my work and sabotages my future as a lawyer by submitting a false, fraudulent EEOC claim in my name against himself and Brunswick Corporation. And then they disrespect me and I can't get recommendations for law school after 4 summers working at Brunswick. You see, the economic sabotage, the economic sanctions on me have me here right now where I need dental help. I need medical help. But the dental and medical associations, they don't give it away. They wouldn't even see me after they looked and saw that I have a $2,690 deductible before I can get any help. And then I go to social services to figure out, how did I get that deductible? I have no income. No one is paying me income. And they say, oh, you have unearned income. I said, but the definition of income is earned wages, wages in exchange. My ex-husband is supporting me because he doesn't want to see me die. He's paying for my shelter and food and clothing because he doesn't want to see the mother of his children die. There's no exchange. In fact, he and I both have planned for him to be paid back when he retires with my inheritance that Andre stole. Do you see how it's a game of dominoes that fall down? That they have stacked up my life in a way that is constant sabotage, constant trauma, constant deprivation, constant theft. And I can't get treated for a lump in my breast. I can't be treated for a tooth that's falling out and one with a great big hole. It's hard for me to eat, but I manage because God is good. God is good. People that are trying to live on Social Security because Social Security said, hey, don't fight us. Give us the money because when you get old, we are going to be your lifeline, right? But they didn't control the housing market and the real estate associations run by Europeans that make sure that people don't have equity in there, and the bankers and the what do you call it? The Federal Reserve, Janet Yellen, who keeps determining how much will be robbed, the rate of robbery. So it turns out we were all slaves, and now we are put out to pasture, honey. We are put out to pasture to die of poverty and deprivation, and lack of medical care, and lack of dental care, and surveillance and trauma. While the foreigners at my Zell Center in Palm Springs get free lunch and hire the overseer, Black Caribbean, Hector, because his parents couldn't afford a H, so he's Hector Simpson, to kick me out and abuse my rights and say, don't talk to me like that, when he's abusing my rights and try to dump me and assault me in private. And I say, hey, anything you have to say in front of all these other people. But all the other people, they're on the same team. They don't want me to eat there. They don't want me to eat there. And they're making it very clear. So when I go to social services, I see this man, Mr. Armando, and he's practically laughing in my face at my misery. And he's telling me, and I'm saying, but you can't use the money that my ex-husband sends me because he's only sending it to me until I get something else. And he's 70. He's 70 years old. He's retiring himself. I need full deductible to access the dentist. And he says, yes, but we consider the money that your ex-husband spends on you as unearned income. And I say, that is an oxymoron. You can't unearn something that is by definition earned. But they don't, he just thought I was being a smart aleck. And that upped his ego. And now he wants to mock me and laugh at me more. And mock me. So I really am having a hard time understanding the system and how the system, and then, okay, I get products in exchange for reviews. No money involved. And most of the products I end up giving away after I review them, because it's been something to take my mind away from the pain, and it's been something to give me material comfort that I've been robbed of and stolen. And now they're telling me that I have to pay taxes on goods, which are not fungible. You can't say, oh, dentist, let me give you this blouse in exchange for pulling in this tooth and putting a new crown on it. Oh, doctor, let me give you a ring in exchange for examining the breast lump. It's not money. It's not exchangeable. But somehow the private agency, IRS, and the federal government wants to know every source of material wealth that I have and take a piece of it. Meanwhile, I can be kidnapped by police. Meanwhile, I can be subject to price fixing. Meanwhile, I can be subject to Starlink and other and takeover of land for electronic vehicle refill stations and all these other things that should be prevented by the antitrust courts of America. And I can be hacked into oblivion by a completely unregulated cyberspace that is building the blockchain on our backs, just like they built America. The new system of slavery is in the domain of data. And I'm supposed to try to live on $1,100 a month when there's no place in America where you can live for $1,100 a month. And I can't have free lunch because the Europeans in Riverside County that run the free lunch programs in the senior citizens have decided that because I'm not their kind of person, and because my free speech offends them, because I'm an American and they're not, they're Europeans in my land, they don't want me there. They made me eat outside in 110-degree weather with my service dog. You know, I wouldn't even be so triggered about all this if I hadn't tried to go to the dentist and been turned down. You see, there's no place where you can find out the regulations and the rules and what happens. You have to find out when you go, and that's when you find out. There's nothing online. There's no documents. There's no documents in Benefits Cal or any of the online things that will tell you any of the facts about what is happening in your life. They won't tell you the facts. So now I have to deal with filing income tax on goods I received in exchange for reviews, even though I don't have a small business. Because why would I start a small business again when GoDaddy will steal my website advertising revenue and modify my data and put a whole layer in there? Why would I start a business? Why would I invest online when Coinbase stole $500 from me in an unauthorized ACH transaction, which is direct access to my bank? So no protection for money I have to come up with and pay to a foreign-owned corporation that wants to know every single way that I'm making my way. And they want a piece of it in exchange for nothing but torture and exploitation. And when I hear my friends talk, when I hear a friend of mine from college telling me what Social Security is giving him and how much of his life he put into the system and how they told us, you have to understand, they told us that if we pay now, they will pay later. They told us we would probably own our own houses, but they did not protect that. And then it looks like it's our fault. Well, it's your fault. Nobody made you take out an equity loan. And you say, yeah, but I had medical bills. You didn't control the bills of the HMOs once you centralized medicine. And you made it impossible for doctors to make their prices suit the population like it used to be. You know, doctors used to come and take care of you for some chickens, some eggs, an exchange of goods. But now I got a government that wants me to pay taxes on the few little comforts that I've gotten. And you want to know what? I gave most of those goods away. But now I got to file taxes which is going to be very hard for me. I don't understand. It's going to be very hard for me because otherwise I'm criminally liable for not reporting income. Although to me, there's no such thing as unearned income, and there's no such thing as goods that have to be paid money. I don't have any money. Yale, Harvard, the Ford Foundation, University of Massachusetts, Illinois Bell, Sheldon L. Epstein, Brunswick Corporation, GoDaddy. They all made sure that I would have nothing. Andre Martin Tepetty, Isaac Tepetty's gold diggers. All of these dominoes are stacked up against me. And here I am. Early detection, not for me. Dental health, not for me. A place to live, not for me. I got to live in hotels because in Arizona, when Patty Koch said I can't rent another place with her because she knew that she had pretty much reached the top of my capacity to pay her and still eat. So she evicts me, like she evicted the man that used to steal from me who lived across the hall. So he was a Canadian, he was a European from Canada. So it's not color bound. They're doing this to Europeans too, kicking them out of their homes, kicking them out of their apartments, and putting them in a market where their income cannot put them in a new place. Can't put them in a new place. Can't put them in a new home. There are waiting lists on all the affordable housing, and all the affordable housing is privately owned, which means that they can say, well, you know what, it suits my tax picture to only have this 50% occupied so that I can claim deductions on unoccupied space. So I'm only going to rent this to my friends, and the rest I'm going to take as a tax deduction. So the IRS will work with Europeans to make sure that they stay fat. But me and my people, they want to suck the life out of us by stealing all of our assets. So now here I am. I just realized, I just did the research to discover that I'm going to have to pay taxes on the goods I got last year in exchange for reviews. That is taxable income on the fair market value of the products. Now, fair market value is negotiable, right? And all the invoices I receive say zero. Price paid zero. Tax paid zero. Value zero, right? To me, that says value zero. So I'm thinking that I don't have to pay taxes because all of this is not worth any US dollars. The things I'm getting. So I ordered things that I gave away to people because the people in Houston in that hotel were so poor. And, the children were half naked, and I didn't know that they were half naked because they were sex slaves. I thought their parents, mostly felons, couldn't afford to support them. And I'm living there in the crack house hotel with the felons under FEMA authorization, under Sergeant Donna Joubert. I'm living in a FEMA camp, just like the one Leak Project Rex Bear told us about in 2017, 2016, 2018. He said they're going to have FEMA camps before all this devastation, right? And we know from websites like Real Raw News that the FEMA camps were actually robbing people, Europeans, who were in the flood zones and the hurricanes. The FEMA was going in and stealing the assets that people left behind and all the destruction. Their strong boxes full of their jewelry and cash stolen by FEMA. Well, being a targeted individual means that you stand up and you fight for the real America, for your human rights, instead of laying down to die. Well, I'm Silver Rain Runningcloud, and I've been doing this for almost 2.5 hours now, and I haven't eaten yet because I woke up in the middle of the night to write the document to revise my income declaration for Social Security and for Medicare, no, and for California Social Services, Riverside County Social Services, because now I found out that I have unearned income and I have income in the form of goods. And even though neither of those are cash exchanged for goods or services as income is defined, all the Europeans did was change the definition of income to encompass all you got. Well, I hope they don't put me in jail. I hope they don't put me in prison. I hope this isn't, the end of Silver Rain Runningcloud in prison, because I'd hate to be locked up when the shit goes down, because being locked up is not going to be the place to be when we reach the end of this era, if you know what I mean. So gloriously, I've seen enough signs in the skies to let me know that the police and security guards on the ground that seem to be shadowing me are not going to be able to capture me again and threaten my life again. I believe that I am protected. Plus, today, I didn't go to the church I've been going to. I started to go to church here in Texas as a part of my re-socialization after the concentration camp and after the gang stalking in Arizona and after the mental illness decade in Connecticut after Harvard and Yale and the Ford Foundation and Swarthmore and Columbia robbed me of my intellectual property and blacklisted me in the profession in the University of Massachusetts, blacklisted me in the profession. Once they dried up all of the sources of future for me, that took me out of society, right? I mean, once my friends realized I was a targeted individual, they didn't want to be friends with me and have their children left with no future and go through the stuff I've had to go through. No. But I was told by a general in the opposing forces that all that is behind me, that I'm safe now. I was removed from the concentration camp. I was rescued from the FEMA concentration camp at the OYO Hotel in Houston, Texas. I was saved from that and brought to California. And I expected things to be brand new here until I got to the Mazel Center, which is for Jews only, and a few Goyim that they select. And they have people from all over the world there benefiting from that, eating free lunches every day for $35 a year. But they did not want me there to enjoy that. And when I went to the one here in Indio, they also want to give me a hard time because I live in a hotel and don't have a permanent address, a home. And they want to give me a hard time. So they talk to their supervisors. And guess what? This community is mostly brown Spanish speaking people. And they're very militant, and they should be, to protect their property. But do you want to know who ran that center? An European, a blonde, wealthy looking European, pulling down those big bucks, pulling down those six figures to run the community center, the senior center, the free meal lunch center among the brown community. So they always appoint one of themselves in the plum spot. So when I saw her come out to tell me that they would accept my application, I didn't want to go there. I said, she'll probably poison the food, because my experience with Europeans has not been good. And that's including best friends I made in Canada who turned their backs on me while living in my country where they came to, following me for the good life here, the Europeans. You see? Just look at Australia. Look at New Zealand. But more importantly, look at India and tell me how many places you see a European. I mean, I go to places that are supposed to be Black cultural centers here, and I see a European spy everywhere. But anyway, I found a church here, and it's an AME church because my mom went to the AME church, and I didn't know which church would be the Black church until I went to the AME church. I knew that it would be the Black church, although There aren't very many Black people there. It's a very small congregation, and there are only a handful of Black people left there. But our pastor at that church, I'm not a member, I just go there. She went to the AME conference in Los Angeles this weekend, and we didn't have church. So my friend in church, I love this lady. She's my friend. She's one of the first friends I've made, but she was worried and looked out after me and actually got my phone number and tried to help me with housing. I mean, she really took an interest in me as a person and my needs as a person. So today we went to a different church that she knows about, and it was the Baptist church, the First Baptist church. And oh my goodness, I had such a good time. They have a big congregation. The people were warm and friendly to me. And when they said, "Does anybody want prayer?" Well, I said, "I do." I said, "I do." So the pastor and the mother of the church were there in the front. And I went to the front of the church and I sat in the chair, and I was the only one that wanted personal prayer that day. And I looked out on their congregation at all the beautiful faces of all the beautiful people there to worship God with me. You see, I'm not a Christian, but I love God so, so much. It's just I can't adhere to the doctrine of Christianity because I believe in God and not God's Son as much. But we're all there for God, you see, and that's why I'm there. I'm there to worship God with other human beings, to love God with other human beings, because it's so important to me, because I've spent most of my life praying and loving God. I should have been a nun, like a real nun, because that's my devotion to God. That's the level of my devotion to God. So I'm there with all the other holy people worshiping God. And there are not enough young people there. You know, we have to bring the young people in to give them the spiritual tradition and the strength that they need to rely on in hard times, and the support and wisdom of the elders of the community that you can find in church. Anyway, my great grandparents, as I said, on both sides, including the European, Martin Edwards, he was one of the founders of the Mill Spring Baptist Church. So my tradition has been in Baptist. It was my mother who went to the AME, Episcopal Church. And I followed in her footsteps, but today I went to the Baptist Church. And I'll be honest, I had a much better time there than I do at the AME church. The congregation is just more fluid, more warm, more sincere, more genuine, more loving. And it just felt totally different there. And I'm sitting in the chair and I'm looking out at all of the faces of the devout chosen ones. And I'm feeling so blessed because I need their prayers. I need their love and I need their prayers. I needed their prayers on me because they've got me against the wall. My body is failing me and I can't get medical care and I can't exchange my wealth products for the things I need because I don't have any fungible wealth because of all the times that I've been robbed. And nobody's done anything to keep me from being robbed. I haven't been treated like a citizen, but I'm going to be held to the standards of a citizen when it comes to paying the Internal Revenue Service and telling all of my financial sources. You have to report them. And you say, but the money my husband gives me is from compassion. Don't punish us for that. Let him stop. Let the government pay me. We've paid enough. My millionaire mother paid enough. My billionaire stepfather paid enough. My natural daddy paid enough. We've paid enough for the government to take care of me, who cannot take care of herself because of all the sabotage that they didn't protect me from. So they didn't do any of their government responsibilities for me as a citizen, but they want to be paid. And because I have to find a way to pay them, I can't take care of me, and they won't give me what I need. And I have to be up half the night wondering, do they have any grounds to prosecute me? Because I'm being investigated and prosecuted. I can feel it. By the way, Mr. Armando's raising his eyebrows when he sees my file and laughing at me and mocking at me and admonishing me not to be a thief or a perjurer. I'm exhausted, so I needed those prayers over me. And I sat in that chair, and the pastor held my hand, and the mother of the church held my shoulders. And I began to cry. And the pastor asked me, "What are you praying to God for?" And all I could say was a better life, because I couldn't say just one thing. I couldn't say, well, I'm praying for love, and I'm praying for money, and I'm praying for a house, and I'm praying for a car, and I'm praying for my enemies to stop attacking me, and I'm praying for my enemies to be defeated and dissolved, because they're causing so much pain and suffering and enslavement for all of us. All of my people are targeted by the Europeans and the ones they work for. All of us are on the chopping block. So all I could say to him was, I'm praying for a better life through the tears that are welling through me. So I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the congregation, and the congregation is looking at me, and I'm feeling so blessed, and I'm blessing their hearts. And I'm weeping. The tears are falling down my face. I can't stop them. I'm openly weeping. And do you want to know what? It's the first time I've been comforted while I've been weeping since the 1990s. Well, that's not exactly true. When I realized that Yale and Harvard had sabotaged me, I sat in Gail Pemberton's car. She was my only ally, and she paid the price for it. Gail was my only friend. She gave me a job at Wesleyan. She tried to give me confidence and faith. She tried to be a buffer. And that day when I was telling her, they have me locked up, they have me ruined, I've been blacklisted, I've been sabotaged, and I don't know where to go. This is my dream. And I cried so hard. And Gail comforted me. And that was probably in the 1990s. So I didn't lie. It was 1990s is the last time anyone comforted me when I cried. And to tell you the honest to God truth, I hardly ever cried through all of this stuff. Because I'm very strong. God gave me strength, and God gave me faith that I'm going through all of this as a witness. So when the end comes, I can say, yes, this ending is deserved. This ending is karma. Let the new life start with the people that deserve it, the people that love God, the people that love each other. Let the new life begin, because the destruction behind us that God permits is deserved. And I'm a witness. I'm a witness because they put me through it. They put me through the ringer. And I saw the heartlessness, and I saw the lack of compassion, and I saw the cruelty, and I saw the European nationalist racism destroy everyone, and I saw the government make sure that everybody has dreams and hopes when they're young, and then they're funneled into a system that strips them down to the bone and left to die young. Thank you for joining me. I'm Silver Rain Runningcloud.